She grabs wrong suitcase at airport, but the billionaire owner finds it and love in the mix-up. The Charleston International Airport was chaos wrapped in tinsel. Lynn Philpott dodged a family of 6, sidestepped a woman pushing a cart of wrapped presents, and nearly collided with an elderly man who'd stopped dead in the middle of the corridor to answer his phone. Holiday travel, the absolute worst. She checked her watch 3:15. Her parents were expecting her in Savannah by 6 for her mother's famous Christmas dinner prep session. If she could grab her bag, get her rental car, and hit the road in the next 30 minutes, she might actually make it. Family, welcome back to Tales That Touch, where we bring you emotional stories of love. Because in truth, love and death cannot be escaped. No one can say when, how, or where. It's never too early or too late. If you're new to this channel, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification button right now so you don't miss what happens next. And if you're one of our returning viewers, thank you so much. We appreciate you. Now, stay with us to the end of this story. Leave a comment with your thoughts and like this video. Let's continue. The baggage carousel was already spinning when she reached it, luggage tumbling down the chute like an assembly line of holiday obligations. Lynn positioned herself near the front, eyes scanning for her suitcase, black, medium-sized, with a distinctive burgundy ribbon tied to the handle. Her mother had suggested the ribbon years ago. Everyone has black luggage, baby. You need something that stands out. There. Lynn spotted the burgundy ribbon and lunged forward, grabbing the handle just as the suitcase rounded the bend. She yanked it off the carousel, extended the handle, and was halfway to the rental car counter before she realized something was wrong. The suitcase was heavier than she remembered. Much heavier. She paused near a row of chairs, frowning down at the bag. Same black exterior, same burgundy ribbon, but the weight was completely different. Her suitcase had clothes, toiletries, a few wrapped presents for her family. This felt like it contained bricks. Lynn crouched down and checked the luggage tag. Charles Mershon, 843555014 Charleston, SC. Her stomach dropped. This wasn't her suitcase. No. She spun around, scanning the carousel, but it was already slowing down, only a few forgotten bags making lonely circuits. Her suitcase, her actual suitcase, with her clothes and her laptop and the handmade ornaments she'd made for her parents, was nowhere to be seen. Someone had taken it. Someone had grabbed her bag thinking it was theirs, just like she'd grabbed this one, the burgundy ribbon. Of course. What were the odds that 2 people would have the same idea? Lynn pulled out her phone and dialed the number on the luggage tag. It rang 4 times before a deep voice answered. Hello? Hi, is this Charles Mershon? Speaking. I think I have your suitcase, and I'm pretty sure you have mine. A pause. Then, black bag, burgundy ribbon? That's the one. Well, she could hear the smile in his voice. Looks like we have a problem. Charles Mershon hadn't planned on answering his phone. He'd been in the middle of a conference call with his Tokyo team, reviewing projections for the new property opening in Shibuya next spring. But something made him glance at the screen unknown number, local area code, and something else made him excuse himself from the call. Intuition, maybe, or fate. He'd stopped believing in fate 4 years ago, but sometimes the universe had other plans. Now he stood in his mother's kitchen, staring at the suitcase that definitely wasn't his, listening to a woman with a voice like warm honey explain that she was supposed to be on her way to Savannah, but was instead stranded at the airport with his belongings. I'm so sorry, she said. I should have checked the tag before I walked away. My mother always says I move too fast. I never listen. Don't apologize. I did the same thing, saw the ribbon and grabbed it without looking. Charles ran a hand through his hair. Where are you now? Still at baggage claim. I was about to file a report, but I figured I'd try calling first. Good instinct. I'm about 20 minutes from the airport. I can meet you there. You don't have to do that. I mean, I'm the one who made the mistake. We both made the mistake, and you shouldn't have to wait at the airport during the holiday rush when I can fix this in half an hour. He was already reaching for his keys. There's a coffee shop just past security, near the south exit. Bean and Gone. Meet me there? Bean and Gone. She laughed a real laugh, surprised and warm. Okay, I'll be the one looking stressed and surrounded by someone else's belongings. I'll be the one doing the same. Charles hung up and grabbed the wrong suitcase, heading for the door. His mother appeared in the hallway, eyebrows raised. Where are you running off to? You just got here. Suitcase mix-up at the airport. I grabbed someone else's bag. Of course you did. You've been distracted for weeks. Catherine Mershon was 66 years old and still sharp enough to cut glass. She'd been an interior designer for 3 decades before retiring, and she'd passed her eye for detail to her son. Also her tendency to worry. Is everything okay? You've seemed off. I'm fine, Mom. Charles. He stopped at the door, one hand on the frame. It's just the anniversary coming up. You know how it is. Catherine's expression softened. 4 years since Amelia died. 4 years since Charles had closed off his heart and buried himself in work. The hotels had flourished. The man had withered. Go get your suitcase, she said gently, but maybe take your time coming back. Breathe a little. The world won't end if you're not rushing. I'll try. He meant it. He just didn't know how. Lynn spotted him the moment he walked into Bean and Gone. Tall, athletic build, sandy brown hair that looked like it had been styled by someone who knew what they were doing. He wore a charcoal peacoat over what she guessed was a very expensive sweater, and he moved through the crowded coffee shop with the easy confidence of someone who'd never had to worry about whether he belonged. Rich. Definitely rich. She suddenly felt very aware of her own appearance, comfortable travel clothes, hair in twists that were starting to frizz from the dry airplane air, makeup minimal because she'd expected to spend the day in a car, not meeting strangers in coffee shops. He scanned the room, and his eyes landed on her and on his suitcase sitting beside her chair. He smiled. Lynn's heart did something completely unnecessary. Lynn? He extended his hand as he approached. Charles Mershon, the other person with questionable luggage identification skills. She shook his hand warm, firm, a little rough around the palm. Not the soft hands of someone who'd never worked. Interesting. Lynn Philpott, the woman who's now very late to help her mother make cornbread dressing. Cornbread dressing is worth being late for. He set her suitcase beside the table and took the chair across from her. Can I buy you a coffee? As an apology for the chaos. You don't have to do that. I know, but you've been stranded here for almost an hour, and it's the least I can do. He gestured toward the counter. What's your order? Lynn hesitated for exactly 1 second. Her mother's voice echoed in her head. When good things come your way, don't push them aside out of pride. Rosalind Philpott had a saying for everything. Oat milk latte. Extra shot. A woman who knows what she wants. I respect that. He was back in 3 minutes with her latte and something that smelled like pure sugar for himself. Peppermint mocha, he admitted, catching her amused expression. Don't judge. It's the holidays. No judgment. I respect a man who can admit he has a sweet tooth. They sat there for a moment, sipping their drinks, the chaos of the airport swirling around them. Lynn studied him over the rim of her cup. Up close, he was even more handsome than she'd realized, but there was something in his eyes. Something heavy. A sadness that didn't match the easy smile. So, he said, Savannah for Christmas? Every year. My parents still live there. Dad was a firefighter. Retired now. Mom taught 3rd grade for 30 years before she hung it up. Lynn smiled at the thought of them. They're disgustingly in love. Been married 40 years and still hold hands when they watch TV. That's beautiful. It is. Also sets completely unrealistic expectations for the rest of us. She said it lightly, but there was truth beneath the joke. After Derek, after the broken engagement and the humiliation of cancelling a wedding 6 weeks before it was supposed to happen, Lynn had started to wonder if love like her parents had was even possible anymore. What about you? She asked. Charleston for the holidays. Born and raised. My mother still lives in the house I grew up in. She refuses to move even though it's way too big for one person. Charles's expression shifted, something flickering across his features too fast for Lynn to read. My father passed away 6 years ago. Heart attack. So it's just the 2 of us now. And my sister, when she can make it. I'm sorry about your father. Thank you. He was a good man. Demanding, but good. Built the foundation for everything I have now. Charles wrapped both hands around his cup, staring into the whipped cream. He'd be proud of what I've done with it. I think. I hope. There was doubt in his voice. Real doubt. Lynn recognized it because she felt it herself sometimes, the question of whether the people who loved you would approve of who you'd become. I'm sure he would be, she said quietly. Charles looked up, and their eyes met. Something passed between them, recognition, maybe. The sense of two people who understood what it meant to carry weight that others couldn't see. Thank you, he said. That means more than you know. They talked for an hour. Lynn didn't mean to. She had places to be, family waiting, cornbread dressing that wouldn't make itself. But Charles Mershon was easy to talk to. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. He laughed at her jokes, even the bad ones. He shared stories about growing up in Charleston, about his mother's obsession with antiques, about the time he'd tried to sneak a stray dog into his bedroom and it had eaten his father's favorite shoes. He didn't speak to me for a week, Charles said, grinning at the memory, but he let me keep the dog. What was his name? The dog? Captain, because I was 8 and obsessed with pirates. Lynn laughed so hard she nearly snorted her latte. Captain, that's amazing. He lived to be 15. Best dog I ever had. Charles's smile turned wistful. I keep meaning to get another one, but I travel too much. Wouldn't be fair to the animal. What do you do? For work, I mean. Hotels? I own a hospitality company. Boutique properties mostly. High-end. Lynn's eyebrows rose. That sounds successful. It pays the bills. He said it casually, almost dismissively. What about you? Interior design. I have my own firm in Atlanta. Small but growing. We do residential mostly, some commercial. Nothing glamorous. Are you kidding? Interior design is all about creating spaces where people feel at home. There's nothing more important than that. Charles leaned forward, genuine interest in his eyes. What's your favorite project you've ever done? No one had ever asked her that before. Not Derek, who'd been more interested in how much money her firm made than in what she actually created. Not her brother Terence, who thought design was just picking out furniture. Not even her parents, who loved her unconditionally but didn't quite understand what she did all day. There was this family in Decatur, Lynn said slowly, the memory rising warm in her chest. Single mom, 3 kids, tiny house that was falling apart. She'd saved for years to afford a renovation. When I walked in, she apologized for the mess, for the budget, for everything, like she expected me to look down on her. What did you do? I designed her a home, not a showpiece, a home. Somewhere her kids could do homework at the kitchen counter while she cooked dinner. A reading nook under the stairs because her oldest loved books. A backyard space where they could have barbecues in the summer. Lynn's throat tightened at the memory of the woman's face when she'd seen the final result. When we finished, she cried, hugged me and didn't let go for 5 minutes. Said it was the first time in her life she'd felt like she had a real home. Charles was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. That's extraordinary. It wasn't that big a deal. Yes, it was. You gave that family something most people never get. You made them feel seen. He shook his head slowly. That's a gift, Lynn. Don't downplay it. She didn't know what to say. Didn't know how this stranger in a coffee shop had seen something in her that she'd been trying to believe about herself for years. Her phone buzzed. A text from her mother. Baby, where are you? The turkey isn't going to brine itself. Lynn winced. I have to go. My mother is sending passive-aggressive texts about poultry. Charles laughed. That's my cue to let you escape. He stood when she did, a gesture so old-fashioned it caught her off guard. It was really nice meeting you, Lynn. You too, and thanks for the coffee, and for not being mad about the suitcase thing. How could I be mad? It's the most interesting thing that's happened to me in months. They stood there for a moment, neither quite ready to walk away. The airport bustled around them, travelers rushing past, announcements echoing overhead. But Lynn felt like they were in their own little bubble, separate from the chaos. Can I? Charles hesitated. Would it be completely inappropriate if I asked for your number? Lynn's heart stuttered. For luggage, related emergencies, for whatever you want it to be for. He smiled, but there was vulnerability beneath it, nervousness, like he hadn't done this in a long time and wasn't sure he remembered how. She should say no. She'd just gotten out of a 2-year recovery period from her last relationship disaster. She lived in Atlanta. He lived in Charleston. She didn't know anything about him except that he owned hotels and had once had a dog named Captain. But something about him made her want to say yes. "Give me your phone," she said. He handed it over, and she typed in her number, adding her name with a small luggage emoji beside it. "Lynn Philpott, suitcase thief," he read, grinning. "I'll treasure this forever. Don't make it weird." Too late. He pocketed the phone and picked up his suitcase, his actual suitcase this time. "Drive safe, Lynn, and Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Charles." She watched him walk away, disappearing into the crowd of holiday travelers. Then she grabbed her own suitcase and headed for the rental car counter, her mother's texts growing increasingly urgent. But she was smiling. For the first time in 2 years, she was actually smiling. Charles didn't text her that night. He wanted to. God, he wanted to. He lay in bed in his childhood room now, a guest suite his mother had redecorated 3 times since he'd moved out, and stared at his phone, composing and deleting message after message. "It was great meeting you today. Too boring. I can't stop thinking about our conversation. Too intense. Hope you made it to Savannah in time to brine the turkey." Too turkey-focused. He set the phone down and stared at the ceiling instead. What was he doing? 4 years. It had been 4 years since Amelia died. 4 years since he'd felt anything for anyone. He'd gone on exactly 3 dates in that time, all of them set up by well-meaning friends, all of them disasters. He'd smiled through dinners and made appropriate conversation and felt absolutely nothing. But today, in that coffee shop, talking to a woman he'd met through a ridiculous suitcase mix-up, he'd felt something, a spark, a flicker of interest that had nothing to do with politeness and everything to do with wanting to know more. Lynn Philpott, interior designer from Atlanta, who made homes for families who needed them, who laughed with her whole body and wasn't afraid to admit she'd made a mistake, who had parents who still held hands after 40 years and seemed genuinely happy about it rather than cynical. She was beautiful. That was obvious, but Charles had met plenty of beautiful women in his line of work. Beauty wasn't what had caught his attention. It was the way she'd looked at him when he talked about his father, the way she'd said, "I'm sure he would be proud," and meant it. The way she'd shared that story about the single mother in Decatur, her eyes bright with emotion, completely unaware of how remarkable she was. She saw people, really saw them, and for just a moment, Charles had felt seen too. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Made it to Savannah. Turkey successfully brined. Thanks for the coffee and the company. Lynn, the suitcase thief." Charles grinned in the dark. He typed back, "Glad the poultry emergency was resolved. Sleep well, Lynn. Talk soon." Her response came 30 seconds later, "Talk soon." Charles set his phone on the nightstand and closed his eyes. For the first time in years, he fell asleep smiling. The next morning, Lynn woke to the smell of bacon and her mother's humming. She lay in her childhood bedroom, the same room she'd slept in from ages 5 to 18, now repainted a soft sage green, but still containing her old bookshelf and the window seat where she'd spent countless hours reading romance novels and dreaming about a love that would sweep her off her feet. Funny how those dreams had faded after Derek. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. Lynn reached for it, expecting a work email or a group chat message from her college friends. Instead, she found a text from an unfamiliar number she'd saved just last night. "Good morning, suitcase thief. How's Savannah treating you?" Lynn smiled before she could stop herself. "It's 7 a.m. Why are you awake?" "Couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind." "Like what?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Like wondering if it would be too forward to ask if I could see you again before you head back to Atlanta." Lynn's heart did a little flip. She stared at the message, reading it twice to make sure she hadn't imagined it. This was crazy. She'd known this man for exactly 1 day, 1 accidental meeting at an airport, 1 hour of conversation over coffee, 1 text exchange before bed. That was it. That was the entire foundation of whatever this was. But something about Charles Mershon felt different. Something about the way he'd looked at her, really looked at her, like she was worth paying attention to. Something about the vulnerability in his eyes when he talked about his father. Something about the fact that he'd asked for her number like he wasn't sure she'd say yes. "What did you have in mind?" she typed back. "Charleston is beautiful this time of year. The historic district is decorated for Christmas. There's this restaurant I love that does incredible low-country cuisine. And I know a great spot to watch the sunset over the harbor. Is this your standard tourism pitch? This is me awkwardly trying to ask you on a date without actually using the word date, because I'm out of practice and terrified of rejection. Lynn laughed out loud. Her mother's voice drifted up from downstairs. Baby, breakfast is ready. Who are you laughing at this early? Nobody, Mama. She typed back. I'm supposed to be in Savannah until the 26th, but I could maybe drive up on the 22nd. Stay the night. Head back the next day? I would like that very much. Then it's a date, and yes, I'm using the word. Bold. I respect it. Lynn set her phone down and pressed both hands to her cheeks, which were flushed and warm. She felt like a teenager with a crush. It was ridiculous. It was wonderful. It was terrifying. Downstairs, the Philpott kitchen was exactly as Lynn remembered, warm and cluttered and smelling like heaven. Her father sat at the table with his newspaper, a ritual he'd maintained even after everything went digital. Walter Philpott was 64 years old, retired after 30 years with the Savannah Fire Department, and still built like he could run into a burning building if he needed to. His hair was grey now, his face lined with years of smoke and worry, but his eyes were the same kind and steady and fiercely protective. There's my baby girl. He looked up as Lynn entered, his face splitting into a grin. Sleep okay? Like a rock. She kissed his cheek and stole a piece of bacon from the plate her mother was assembling. Mama, you've outdone yourself. It's just breakfast. Rosalind Philpott waved away the compliment, but Lynn could see her preening. Sit down. Eat. You're too thin. Mama, I'm not thin. I'm exactly the same size I was at Thanksgiving. Too thin, Rosalind repeated firmly, setting a loaded plate in front of her daughter. Scrambled eggs, bacon, grits, toast with homemade jam. Enough food for 3 people. Lynn didn't argue. She'd learned long ago that arguing with Rosalind Philpott about food was a losing battle. So, her mother said, settling into her own chair with a cup of coffee, who had you giggling upstairs? I wasn't giggling. Baby, I've known you for 33 years. I know what your giggle sounds like. Walter looked up from his paper with sudden interest. There's a boy? There's not a boy. There's just someone I met. Where? Rosalind leaned forward, her coffee forgotten. When? Is he handsome? What does he do? Mama, I'm asking normal questions. Lynn sighed, but she was smiling. I met him yesterday, at the airport. There was a suitcase mix-up. We grabbed each other's bags by accident. He drove to the airport to exchange them, and we ended up talking for a while. A while? Walter's eyebrows rose. How long is a while? An hour. Maybe a little more. Her parents exchanged a look, the kind of look that came from 40 years of marriage and a shared language that didn't require words. And now he's texting you? Rosalind asked. He asked if he could see me again. I said yes. Lynn. Her mother reached across the table and took her hand. Are you sure? After everything with Derek? This isn't Derek. The words came out more forcefully than Lynn intended. She softened her voice. This is different. He's different. I can't explain it, but when I was talking to him, I felt like myself. Not the version of myself I think people want to see. Just me. Rosalind studied her daughter's face for a long moment. Whatever she saw there must have satisfied her, because she nodded slowly. Then you should go see him. Really? Really. Life's too short to let fear make your decisions for you. Rosalind squeezed her hand. Your father asked me out 3 times before I said yes. You know why I finally agreed? Because he wore you down? Walter snorted. I was persistent. You were annoying, Rosalind corrected, but she was smiling. I said yes because I saw something in him, something real, something worth taking a chance on. She looked at Lynn with eyes full of love and hope. If you see that in this man, don't let it pass you by. Lynn thought about Charles, about the sadness behind his smile, about the way he'd asked for her number like he wasn't sure he deserved to, about the text this morning admitting he was out of practice and terrified of rejection. I think I do, she said quietly. See something, I mean. Then go find out what it is. Charles spent the next 4 days in a state of anticipation he hadn't felt since he was a teenager. He threw himself into work to distract himself reviewing plans for the Shibuya property, approving designs for the new spa at the Austin location, taking calls with his marketing team about the spring campaign. But every few hours, his phone would buzz with a message from Lynn, and everything else would fade into background noise. She sent him pictures from Savannah, her parents' house decorated for Christmas, lights twinkling in every window, her mother's famous pecan pie cooling on the counter. A selfie of her and her father at some restaurant, both of them making ridiculous faces at the camera. "Dad says I have to bring you to Savannah sometime so he can interrogate you properly," she texted. "I'm terrified and honored in equal measure. As you should be. He was a firefighter for 30 years. He's seen some things." Charles found himself smiling at his phone so often that his mother started giving him suspicious looks. "You seem lighter," Catherine observed on the third day, watching him scroll through his messages at the breakfast table. "Do I?" "Don't play coy. It doesn't suit you." She set a cup of coffee in front of him. "Is this about the suitcase girl? Her name is Lynn." "Lynn?" Catherine smiled. "Pretty name. Tell me about her." So Charles did. He told his mother about the airport meeting, the coffee shop conversation, the texts that had become the highlight of his days. He told her about Lynn's work, her family, the way she laughed at her own jokes before anyone else could. "She sounds lovely," Catherine said when he finished. "She is. But?" Charles looked up. "What do you mean, but?" "I mean you have that look on your face, the one you get when you're waiting for the other shoe to drop." Catherine reached across the table and touched his hand. "Not everyone leaves, Charles. Not everyone dies." The words hit him like a physical blow. 4 years. It had been 4 years since Amelia, and he still caught himself waiting for tragedy, still flinched when his phone rang unexpectedly, still checked his rearview mirror 3 times before changing lanes, just in case. Amelia had been driving home from her parents' house, a December night, just like this one. She'd called to say she was on her way, that she'd be home in 20 minutes. 30 minutes later, he'd gotten the call that changed everything. "I know that," he said, his voice rough. "I know not everyone." "Do you?" Catherine's eyes were gentle but probing. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been hiding from life for 4 years, burying yourself in work, refusing to let anyone get close." She squeezed his hand. "Amelia wouldn't want that for you." "I know. She loved you. She'd want you to be happy, to find someone who makes you feel the way she did." Charles's throat was tight. "What if I can't? What if that part of me died with her?" "Oh, sweetheart." Catherine stood and came around the table, pulling him into a hug the way she had when he was small. "That part of you isn't dead. It's just been sleeping. And maybe," she pulled back to look at him, "maybe this woman is the one who's going to wake it up." Charles thought about Lynn, about the way his chest felt lighter when he saw her name on his phone, about the way he'd started looking forward to things again, to seeing her, to talking to her, to finding out what she'd say next. "Maybe," he admitted, "maybe she is." December 22nd dawned grey and cold, but Lynn barely noticed. She'd said goodbye to her parents that morning, promising to be back for Christmas Day, enduring her mother's third reminder to drive safe and text when you get there, and her father's gruff, "Be careful with this one." Then she'd gotten in her rental car and pointed it towards Charleston, her heart beating faster with every mile. The drive took 2 hours. 2 hours of Christmas music on the radio and nerves fluttering in her stomach and rehearsing what she'd say when she saw him. "Hi. Hello. Good to see you again. Thanks for inviting me." Everything sounded either too casual or too formal. Nothing captured what she actually felt, which was something between excitement and terror and hope. Charles had offered to book her a room at one of his hotels. "My treat, please, it's the least I can do." But Lynn had insisted on finding her own accommodations. Not because she was too proud to accept, but because she needed to maintain some boundaries, some sense of control in a situation that felt increasingly out of her hands. She'd booked a room at a bed and breakfast in the historic district, charming, affordable, within walking distance of everything Charles had mentioned wanting to show her. He met her at the B&B at 4 o'clock, just as the afternoon light was starting to turn golden. Lynn saw him before he saw her. He was standing on the sidewalk, hands in the pockets of his coat, scanning the street with an expression of barely contained anticipation. When his eyes landed on her car, his whole face transformed. There it was again. That smile. the one that made her feel like she was the most important person in the world. She parked and got out, suddenly self-conscious about her outfit, a burgundy sweater dress and boots, carefully chosen to be festive but not trying too hard. Did it look like she was trying too hard? Charles solved the problem by stepping forward and pulling her into a gentle embrace, brief but warm, his arms solid around her, his cologne something subtle and expensive that made her want to lean in closer. "Thank you for coming," he murmured against her hair. "I've been looking forward to this all week." "Me too." They pulled apart, both slightly flushed, both smiling like idiots. "So," Charles said, offering his arm. "Ready for the grand tour?" Lynn tucked her hand into the crook of his elbow. "Lead the way." Charleston in December was something out of a postcard. Gas lamps flickered along cobblestone streets lined with historic homes, each one decorated for the holidays. Wreaths hung on every door, garlands wound around iron railings. The air smelled like salt, water and wood smoke, and the promise of something magical. Charles walked her through the historic district, pointing out landmarks and sharing stories. The church where his parents had gotten married, the park where he'd learned to ride a bike, the corner where he'd had his first kiss at 15, a disaster of epic proportions that I've never fully recovered from. "What made it so disastrous?" Lynn asked, laughing. "I completely missed her mouth, ended up kissing her nose." "No, I'm not even joking. She didn't speak to me for a month. I considered transferring schools." Lynn laughed so hard she had to stop walking. Charles watched her with a mixture of amusement and wonder, like he couldn't quite believe he'd been the one to make her laugh like that. "You're beautiful when you laugh," he said quietly. Lynn's laughter faded into something softer. "Charles." "Sorry. Too much?" "No," she shook her head. "Not too much. Just unexpected." "I meant it." He reached out and touched her face, the briefest brush of his fingers against her cheek. "You're beautiful all the time, but when you laugh it's like watching the sun come out." Lynn didn't know what to say, didn't know how to process the fact that this man, this kind, handsome, wealthy man who could have anyone he wanted, was looking at her like she was the answer to a question he'd been asking for years. "Thank you," she managed. "Come on." He took her hand, interlacing their fingers like it was the most natural thing in the world. "There's something I want to show you." He led her down to the waterfront, to a bench overlooking Charleston Harbor. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and gold. Boats bobbed in the water. Seagulls called overhead. It was perfect. Postcard perfect. Movie perfect. "This is my favorite spot in the city," Charles said as they sat down. "I used to come here when I needed to think, or when I needed to not think. After my dad died, I spent hours here, just watching the water, trying to remember how to breathe. It's beautiful." "It is." But he wasn't looking at the sunset. He was looking at her. "Lynn, I have to tell you something." Her heart clenched. Here it was, the catch, the reason this was too good to be true. "Okay. I was married before. My wife, she died 4 years ago. Car accident." The words hung in the air between them. Lynn felt the weight of them, the grief and loss and devastation packed into those simple sentences. "Charles, I'm so sorry." Her name was Amelia. We were together for 8 years, married for 5. His voice was steady, but she could see the effort it took. "I loved her. I still love her. I probably always will." "Of course you will. That doesn't go away." "I haven't been with anyone since, haven't wanted to be. I thought that part of my life was over, that I'd had my chance at love, and it was done." He turned to face her fully, his brown eyes raw and vulnerable. "And then you grabbed my suitcase at an airport, and everything changed." Lynn's eyes stung with tears she refused to shed. "I don't know what this is," Charles continued. "I don't know what we're doing, or where it's going. All I know is that when I'm with you, I feel something I thought I'd never feel again, and I wanted you to know that, to understand what it means that I'm here, that I asked you to come." "Charles." Lynn reached for his hand, holding it tight. "Thank you for telling me. That couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't." He laughed, the sound shaky. "I've been rehearsing that speech for 3 days." "You did great." "Yeah?" "Yeah." She squeezed his hand. "And for what it's worth, I think you're incredibly brave. To let yourself feel again after losing someone like that. Most people would have shut down forever." I did shut down. For 4 years. You're the first person who's made me want to open back up. The sun had sunk below the horizon now, leaving the sky streaked with purple and dark blue. The first stars were appearing. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang. I was engaged, Lynn said quietly. 2 years ago. His name was Derek. He called off the wedding 6 weeks before it was supposed to happen. Charles's grip on her hand tightened. What happened? He said he wasn't ready, that he'd realized he didn't love me the way he should, that it wasn't fair to either of us to go through with it. She stared out at the water, remembering the devastation of that moment. The humiliation of cancelling everything, the venue, the caterer, the dress she'd already paid for in full. The worst part was, I think I knew before he did. I knew something was off, but I was so desperate for it to work that I ignored every red flag. I'm sorry. Don't be. He did me a favor, honestly. Marrying someone who wasn't sure about me would have been a disaster. She turned to look at Charles, but it took me a long time to believe that, to stop feeling like there was something wrong with me, like I wasn't enough. You're more than enough. Charles said it with such certainty that Lynn felt something crack open in her chest. Whoever made you feel otherwise was an idiot. That's what my mother says. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She is, Lynn smiled. She also said I should give you a chance, that life's too short to let fear make your decisions. I think I like your mother. She'd like you too, once she got done interrogating you. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars multiply overhead. Lynn thought about everything Charles had told her. About Amelia, about his years of grief, about the courage it had taken to reach out to a stranger from an airport. She thought about her own wounds, about Derek and the broken engagement and the 2 years she'd spent rebuilding her sense of self-worth. She thought about the fact that they were both damaged, both scared, both carrying losses that had shaped who they were. And she thought about how, despite all of that, sitting here with him felt right, like something that was meant to happen, like fate if you believed in that sort of thing. So what now? She asked. Charles turned to her, his eyes reflecting the lights from the harbor. Now we go to dinner. I made reservations at this incredible seafood place. They do a shrimp and grits that will change your life. Shrimp and grits? Low country cooking at its finest. You haven't lived until you've tried it. Big promises. I deliver on my promises. He stood and offered his hand. Shall we? Lynn took it and let him pull her to her feet. But instead of walking away, she stayed close, looking up at him in the dim light. Charles? Yeah? I'm glad I grabbed the wrong suitcase. His smile was like the sun coming out. Me too, Lynn. Me too. The shrimp and grits did, in fact, change Lynn's life. She sat across from Charles at a candlelit table in a restaurant called Magnolia's, closing her eyes with every bite, making sounds that probably should have embarrassed her but didn't. I told you, Charles said, watching her with undisguised delight. You told me, and I didn't believe you, and I was wrong. Lynn pointed her fork at him. I'm never doubting your restaurant recommendations again. I'll hold you to that. They talked for hours. The restaurant was warm and intimate, decorated with tasteful Christmas touches, a small tree in the corner, garlands along the windows, soft holiday music drifting from hidden speakers. Their waiter stopped by periodically to refill their wine glasses and check on them, but mostly they were left alone in their little bubble. Charles told her about his business, not the sanitized version he gave to reporters, but the real story. How he'd started with a single boutique hotel in Charleston after his father died, using his inheritance to take a risk that everyone said was crazy. How he'd nearly gone bankrupt in the first year. How he'd worked 18-hour days for 3 years straight, learning everything from housekeeping to finance, determined to build something his father would have been proud of. 47 properties now, he said, almost like he couldn't believe it himself. Hotels on 4 continents. It's surreal sometimes. You built an empire. That's not surreal, that's incredible. It's lonely. The words came out before he seemed to realize he was going to say them. He looked away, embarrassed. Sorry, that's not what I meant to. Charles. Lynn reached across the table and touched his hand. You don't have to apologize for telling the truth. He looked at her, and she saw it again, that vulnerability, that sadness that lived behind his eyes. It's just hard sometimes, being the one everyone looks to for answers. having all this success and no one to share it with. He turned his hand over, interlacing his fingers with hers. Amelia used to keep me grounded. She'd remind me that the hotels weren't the point, that building a life was the point. And after she died, I forgot that. I just kept building, because I didn't know what else to do. What would she think of you now? Charles was quiet for a long moment. She'd be proud of the business, but she'd be disappointed in me, in how I've been living or not living. He met Lynn's eyes. She'd tell me I was wasting time, that I should be out there, taking risks, falling in love again. Smart woman, the smartest. He smiled, but it was tinged with grief. I've spent 4 years feeling guilty for being alive when she isn't, for having a future when hers was stolen. But lately, I've been thinking, maybe that's not what she'd want. Maybe honoring her memory doesn't mean staying stuck in grief forever. It doesn't. Lynn squeezed his hand. It means living fully, living the life she would have wanted for you. Is that what you tell yourself? About Derek? The question caught her off guard. What do you mean? I mean, you lost something too. Maybe not the same way I did, but you lost a future you'd planned for, a life you thought you were going to have. Charles studied her face. How do you move past that? Lynn thought about it, really thought. I remind myself that what I lost wasn't what I actually wanted. I thought I wanted Derek, but what I really wanted was to be loved, to be chosen. And Derek couldn't give me that, not really. So losing him wasn't losing my future. It was making room for a better one. That's incredibly mature. It took me 2 years to get there. Trust me, the first 6 months were a lot of crying and ice cream and watching terrible reality TV. She laughed at herself. I was a mess, but I came out the other side. And now? She looked at him across the candlelit table, this man who'd been through so much worse, and was still sitting here, still trying, still hoping. Now I'm sitting in a beautiful restaurant with a man who makes me feel seen for the first time in years, so I'd say things worked out. Charles lifted her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles softly. I'd say so too. They walked back to her B&B slowly, neither wanting the night to end. The streets were quieter now, most of the tourists gone to their hotels or homes. Christmas lights twinkled in windows. Somewhere, someone was playing piano, a soft, jazzy version of Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas that drifted through the cool night air. This is my favorite time in Charleston, Charles said. Late at night, when everyone's gone home, you can hear the city breathe. That's poetic. I have my moments. They stopped in front of the B&B, standing on the sidewalk in the glow of a gas lamp. Lynn looked up at him, her heart beating faster than it had any right to. Thank you for today, she said. For the tour, for dinner, for everything. Thank you for giving me a chance. Charles stepped closer, his hand coming up to brush a stray curl from her face. Lynn, I know we've only known each other for a few days. I know this is all very fast, but I haven't felt this way in a very long time, and I just need you to know that. I feel it too. The admission came out barely above a whisper. Charles leaned in, and for a moment, Lynn thought he was going to kiss her. But instead he pressed his lips to her forehead, a gesture so tender, so gentle, that it made her eyes sting. Good night, Lynn, he murmured against her skin. Good night, Charles. She watched him walk away, his figure growing smaller in the lamplight, until he turned a corner and disappeared. Then she went inside, climbed the stairs to her room, and fell onto the bed with a smile she couldn't have erased if she'd tried. Her phone buzzed almost immediately. I already miss you. Is that crazy? She typed back, completely crazy. I miss you too. Christmas is in 3 days. I know you're supposed to be with your family, but would you want to come to dinner at my mother's house on Christmas Eve? She's been asking about you. Lynn's heart leaped. You told your mother about me? I tell my mother everything. She's my best friend, also my harshest critic. She wants to meet the woman who put a smile back on my face. Her words. Meeting his mother. That was serious. That was a step toward something real and lasting and terrifying. I'd love to, Lynn typed before she could talk herself out of it. Really? Really. But I have to warn you, I'm bringing my mama's pecan pie. It's a southern thing. My mother will love that. She'll probably try to get the recipe. Good luck to her. Mama guards that recipe like it's a state secret. Lynn fell asleep that night feeling something she hadn't felt in years, genuinely, completely, ridiculously happy. Christmas Eve at the Mershon house was nothing like Lynn had expected. She'd imagined something cold and formal, a mansion filled with expensive art and uncomfortable furniture, the kind of place where you were afraid to touch anything. What she found instead was warmth. Real, genuine warmth. Catherine Mershon answered the door herself, pulling Lynn into a hug before she could even say hello. "So you're the suitcase girl?" Catherine stepped back to look at her, hands on Lynn's shoulders. "My goodness, you're even more beautiful than Charles described. Come in, come in. It's freezing out there." The house was decorated for Christmas in a way that felt lived in and loved. Not designer perfect, but family perfect. Ornaments that were clearly handmade by children. A tree that leaned slightly to the left. Stockings hung on a fireplace that had actual scorch marks from actual fires. "I brought pie," Lynn said, holding out the container. "My mother's recipe." "Pecan." Catherine's eyes lit up. "Charles told me. I've already made room in the refrigerator. Come, let me give you the tour." The tour turned into a 2-hour conversation in the kitchen, where Catherine insisted on sharing a glass of wine and getting to know each other properly. Lynn learned about Charles's childhood, the mischief, the ambition, the way he'd always been driven to prove himself. His father was hard on him, Catherine said, stirring something on the stove. Robert had expectations, standards. He loved Charles fiercely, but he showed it through pressure, not praise. She sighed. "I think Charles spent his whole childhood trying to earn his father's approval. And then Robert died before he could really give it." Charles mentioned their relationship was complicated. "That's a kind way to put it." Catherine turned to face her, her expression serious. "Lynn, I'm going to be honest with you. My son has been through hell. Losing his father, then Amelia, it nearly destroyed him. I watched him shut down, bury himself in work, refuse to let anyone in." Her eyes softened. "But since he met you, something's changed." He laughs again. He talks about the future. He looks at his phone and smiles like a lovesick teenager. Lynn felt her cheeks warm. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. Just be patient with him. He's rusty at this. At opening up, at trusting, at believing that good things can happen without something terrible following." Catherine reached out and took Lynn's hand. "But if you can stick with him through the awkward parts, I think you'll find that he's worth it. He's the best man I know." "I believe that." Lynn squeezed her hand. "And for what it's worth, I'm rusty too. We can be rusty together." Catherine smiled, and Lynn saw where Charles got his warmth from. "I like you, Lynn Philpott. I think you're exactly what my son needs." Charles arrived an hour later with his sister Evelyn, who immediately swept Lynn into a hug. "Finally," Evelyn exclaimed. "Someone new to talk to at these things. Mom tells the same stories every year, and Charles just broods in the corner." "I don't brood," Charles protested. "You absolutely brood. You're like a Victorian novel protagonist. All you need is a moor to wander around looking dramatic on." Lynn laughed, and Charles caught her eye across the room, his expression somewhere between mortified and delighted. Dinner was chaos in the best possible way. Catherine had made enough food for 20 people: roast beef, mashed potatoes, green beans, rolls, 3 different kinds of pie. They ate until they couldn't move, told stories until they cried laughing, and eventually migrated to the living room to exchange gifts. "We have a tradition," Charles explained, settling beside Lynn on the couch. "1 gift each on Christmas Eve. The rest wait until morning." "That's sweet. Mom started it when we were kids, said it helped with the anticipation." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wrapped box. "This is for you." Lynn's eyes widened. "Charles, you didn't have to." "I wanted to." He pressed the box into her hands. "Open it." Inside was a delicate silver bracelet with a small charm, a suitcase. Lynn stared at it, her eyes filling with unexpected tears. "It's to remember how we met," Charles said softly, "because that might be the luckiest accident of my entire life." "Charles." She couldn't find words. Instead, she threw her arms around him, burying her face in his shoulder. "Thank you. I love it." "I'm glad." His arms came around her, holding her close. "Merry Christmas, Lynn." "Merry Christmas." From across the room, Catherine caught Lynn's eye and smiled. Lynn drove back to Savannah on Christmas morning, the bracelet glinting on her wrist and a warmth in her chest that had nothing to do with the heater. Her parents noticed immediately. "Something's different about you," Rosalind said, pulling her into a hug the moment she walked through the door. "You're glowing." "I'm not glowing. Baby, you're lit up like a Christmas tree. Walter, come look at your daughter. She's glowing." Walter appeared from the kitchen, dish towel over his shoulder. He took one look at Lynn and nodded slowly. "The Charleston boy. His name is Charles." "The Charleston Charles boy," Walter's mouth twitched. "He treating you right?" "Yes, Daddy, he's treating me very right." "Good." Walter pulled her into a bear hug, his voice gruff against her hair. "That's all I need to know." Christmas with her family was everything Lynn loved, loud and messy and full of love. Terrence had flown in from Chicago with his wife and their 2-year-old son, Jalen, who toddled around the house leaving a trail of wrapping paper chaos in his wake. The house smelled like Rosalind's cooking. The TV played Christmas movies no one was really watching. Arguments about politics were shouted and forgotten within minutes. But throughout the day, Lynn's phone buzzed with messages from Charles. "Merry Christmas from the Mershon household. Mom is already asking when you're coming back. Evelyn says you're way too good for me. I can't argue. I miss you. Is that allowed? We've known each other for a week." Lynn typed back, "It's allowed. I miss you too. When can I see you again? I'm driving back to Atlanta on the 27th, but I could make a detour to Charleston. Please do. I'll clear my entire schedule." "You don't have to do that." "I want to. You're more important than anything on my calendar." Lynn stared at the message, her heart doing gymnastics in her chest. Her mother appeared beside her, reading over her shoulder without a hint of shame. "That's a good man," Rosalind said. "Don't let him get away." "Mama?" "I'm just saying what everyone's thinking." Rosalind kissed her daughter's cheek. "Now come help me with dessert, and tell me everything about his mother." The days between Christmas and New Year's passed in a blur. Lynn stopped in Charleston on her way back to Atlanta, as promised. Charles met her at a small cafe near the harbor, and they talked for 3 hours over coffee and pastries, neither wanting to part. "I have an idea," Charles said as they finally stood to leave. "New Year's Eve. There's a party at one of my hotels, the one in downtown Charleston. Black tie, champagne, fireworks at midnight. It's usually a work thing for me, but this year, I'd like it to be more than that." "Are you asking me to be your date?" "I'm asking you to ring in the new year with me." He took her hands in his. "I want the first person I see in 2025 to be you." Lynn's breath caught. "Charles, too much?" "No," she shook her head, smiling. "Not too much. I'd love to." "Really?" "Really, but I'll need to go shopping. I don't exactly have black tie attire in my suitcase." "I'll send you something. One of the perks of owning hotels, I have connections with designers." "You don't have to do that." "I know I don't, but I want to." He squeezed her hands. "Let me spoil you a little, please." Lynn thought of her mother's words. "When good things come your way, don't push them aside out of pride." "Okay," she said, "but nothing too extravagant." Charles's grin told her that his definition of extravagant was probably very different from hers. But for once, she didn't care. She was done playing it safe, done holding back, done being afraid that good things couldn't happen to her. She was ready to leap. New Year's Eve arrived, wrapped in glitter and anticipation. The dress Charles had sent was stunning, a deep emerald green that made Lynn's skin glow, with a fitted bodice and a skirt that flowed like water when she walked. She'd never worn anything so beautiful in her life. "You look like a queen," her mother said over video call, dabbing at her eyes. "My baby girl, a queen." "Mama, stop. You're going to make me cry and ruin my makeup. I'm just so happy for you, baby. You deserve this, all of it." The party was everything Charles had promised, elegant, glamorous, filled with people in beautiful clothes drinking expensive champagne. But Lynn barely noticed any of it. All she could see was Charles, standing at the entrance to the ballroom in a perfectly tailored tuxedo, his eyes lighting up the moment he saw her. "Lynn." He breathed her name like a prayer. I don't have words." "Then don't talk." She smiled and took his arm. "Just dance with me." They danced for hours. Slow songs, fast songs, songs Lynn didn't know, and songs she'd loved since childhood. Charles held her close, his hand warm on her back, his eyes never leaving hers. At 11:55, he led her to a private balcony overlooking the harbor. The city sparkled below them. In the distance, she could see the fireworks crew preparing for midnight. "Thank you for being here," Charles said, turning to face her. "For taking a chance on me. Thank you for asking. Lynn, I need to tell you something." He took both her hands in his. "These past 2 weeks have been the best of my life. Since Amelia, I mean. Maybe before. You've made me feel things I thought I'd never feel again. Hope, joy, excitement about the future." He swallowed hard. "I know it's fast. I know we're still figuring this out. But I'm falling for you. Hard. And I needed you to know that before the year ends." The clock was ticking toward midnight. 10 seconds. 9. 8. "I'm falling for you too," Lynn whispered. 7. 6. 5. Charles leaned in, his forehead touching hers. 4. 3. 2. "Happy New Year, Lynn." 1. He kissed her. It was soft at first, tentative a question being asked. But then Lynn answered, her hands coming up to cup his face, and the kiss deepened into something more. Something real. Something that felt like the beginning of everything. Fireworks exploded overhead, painting the sky in colors. Cheers erupted from the ballroom behind them. But Lynn and Charles stayed on that balcony, lost in each other, welcoming the new year in the best possible way. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. Charles rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed, a smile playing on his lips. "That was worth waiting for," he murmured. "Yeah." Lynn smiled against his mouth. "Yeah, it was." Family, if you watched this story up to this point, it means it moved you. Leave your thoughts and tell me where you are watching from in the comment, and make sure to like and hit the subscribe button if you haven't. If you found value in this story, smash the hype button and the super thanks button. It really helps my channel. January arrived with a cold snap that settled over the South like a blanket. Lynn sat at her desk in the Philpott Designs office, a converted warehouse space in Atlanta's old Fourth Ward that she'd renovated herself 3 years ago. Exposed brick walls, high ceilings with industrial pendant lights, a wall of windows that let in the grey winter light. It was her sanctuary, the physical manifestation of everything she'd built since Derek walked away. But today, she couldn't focus on any of it. Her phone sat beside her laptop, and every few minutes her eyes drifted to it, waiting for the buzz that would tell her Charles had texted. They'd been doing this dance for 2 weeks now, messages throughout the day, phone calls every night, video chats that stretched past midnight. It was wonderful. It was also torture. Because Charles was in Charleston, and she was in Atlanta, and the 300 miles between them felt like an ocean. "You're doing it again." Lynn looked up to find her assistant, Paloma, standing in the doorway with a knowing smirk. "Doing what?" "Staring at your phone like it holds the meaning of life." Paloma crossed the room and set a cup of coffee on Lynn's desk. "The billionaire boyfriend?" "He's not my boyfriend." "Right. You just spent New Year's Eve with him. You talk every day, and you're wearing a bracelet he gave you that you haven't taken off since Christmas." Paloma raised an eyebrow. "What would you call it?" Lynn touched the silver bracelet on her wrist, the tiny suitcase charm cool against her fingers. "I'd call it complicated. Long distance usually is." Paloma settled into the chair across from Lynn's desk. "Have you two talked about it? How you're going to make this work?" "Not really. We've been too busy just being happy," Lynn sighed, "which probably means we're avoiding the conversation. Or you're enjoying the honeymoon phase. Nothing wrong with that." Paloma took a sip of her own coffee. "But eventually you're going to have to figure out the logistics. You live here. He lives there. Unless one of you is planning to relocate." "It's been 2 weeks, Paloma. We haven't even said I love you yet. Talking about relocation feels like jumping about 50 steps ahead." "Fair point." Paloma stood. "But for what it's worth, the way you light up every time you talk about him, that's not nothing. Whatever this is, it's worth figuring out." She left, and Lynn turned back to her phone just as it buzzed. "Missing you. Is that getting old yet?" She smiled and typed back, "Never. Miss you too." "I have an idea. What are you doing this weekend?" "Working, probably. I have a consultation Monday and a presentation Tuesday." "What if I came to you, flew into Atlanta Friday night, Left Sunday afternoon. That would give us almost 2 full days. Lynn's heart leaped. You'd do that? Just fly here for a weekend? Lynn, I'd fly anywhere for an hour with you. A whole weekend? That's a gift. She stared at the message, her eyes stinging. After Derek, after being made to feel like she wasn't worth the effort, having someone willing to rearrange his life just to see her felt like a miracle. I'd love that, she typed. I'll cook dinner Friday night. You cook? I'm Southern. Of course I cook. Don't sound so surprised. I'm not surprised. I'm excited. I'll text you my flight details. Lynn set her phone down and pressed her hands to her cheeks, which were flushed and warm despite the chill outside. 2 weeks since New Year's Eve, and she still felt like she was floating. It was terrifying. It was also the best feeling in the world. Charles's plane landed at Hartsfield-Jackson at 7:15 on Friday evening. He'd spent the flight going over plans for the new Tokyo property. The Shibuya Hotel was scheduled to open in April, and there were 1,000 details still to finalize. But the moment the wheels touched down, work evaporated from his mind. All he could think about was Lynn. 2 weeks. It had only been 2 weeks since New Year's Eve, since that kiss on the balcony that had rewired something fundamental in his brain, but it felt like a lifetime. Every day without her was a day he was just going through the motions, waiting for the next phone call, the next text, the next glimpse of her face on his screen. He hadn't felt this way since Amelia. The thought used to terrify him. Now it felt like hope. Lynn was waiting for him at arrivals, and the sight of her made his chest ache. She wore a simple sweater and jeans, her hair in loose curls around her shoulders, and she was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. "Hi," she said, her smile breaking across her face like sunrise. "Hi." He dropped his bag and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight against him. She smelled like vanilla and something floral, and he buried his face in her hair, breathing her in. "I missed you. You said that approximately 40 times today via text, and I meant it every time." She laughed and pulled back to look at him. "Come on, dinner's waiting." Lynn's apartment was in Midtown, a high-rise with views of the Atlanta skyline. The space was smaller than Charles had expected. She could have afforded something larger with her business success, but every inch of it was thoughtfully designed. Warm colors, comfortable furniture, books everywhere. It felt like her. "I love it," he said, looking around. "It's perfect. It's small. It's you." He caught her hand and pulled her close. "That makes it perfect." Dinner was shrimp and grits. "You said it changed your life, so I figured I'd try my hand at a low-country classic, and it was incredible." They ate on her couch because she said she hated formal dining rooms, and they talked until the food went cold, and neither of them cared. "Tell me about your week," Lynn said, curling into his side with a glass of wine. "The real version, not the polished one." Charles considered the question. "Exhausting. We're 3 months from opening in Tokyo, and everything's behind schedule. The general contractor is a nightmare. My VP of operations is threatening to quit. And my mother keeps calling to ask when I'm bringing you back to Charleston. That last one doesn't sound so bad." "It isn't. It's the highlight of my week, honestly." He pressed a kiss to her hair. "What about you? How's the business?" "Good. Busy. I landed a new client, a couple renovating a Victorian in Grant Park. It's going to be a huge project, probably 6 months minimum." Lynn's eyes lit up the way they always did when she talked about her work. They want to restore the original character while making it functional for modern life. It's exactly the kind of project I love. "That sounds amazing." "It is, but it's also going to be all-consuming. Long hours, weekends, the whole thing." She hesitated. "I just want you to know that up front, in case it affects things." Charles pulled back to look at her. "Affects things how?" "I don't know. Lynn set down her wine glass, her expression vulnerable. "Derek used to complain that I worked too much. That I cared more about my business than about him. It was one of the reasons he gave for calling off the wedding. Derek was an idiot." "Charles, I'm serious." He took her hands in his. "Lynn, your passion for your work is one of the things I admire most about you. You built something from nothing. You help people create homes. That's incredible." He squeezed her hands. "I run a company with thousands of employees across 4 continents. Trust me, I understand long hours. I understand being consumed by what you're building. If anything, it makes me respect you more." Lynn's eyes glistened. You really mean that? I really do. He cupped her face in his hands. I'm not Derek. I'm not going to punish you for being good at what you do. I'm going to celebrate it. She kissed him, then really kissed him, with an urgency that hadn't been there before. Her hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and Charles responded in kind, one hand tangling in her hair while the other wrapped around her waist. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Stay, Lynn whispered. Tonight, stay with me. Are you sure? I'm sure. She smiled, and it was radiant. I'm really, really sure. Charles woke to sunlight streaming through Lynn's bedroom windows and the smell of coffee brewing. He lay there for a moment, disoriented, before the memories of last night came flooding back. The dinner, the conversation, the way Lynn had looked at him like he was the answer to every question she'd ever asked, the way it had felt to fall asleep with her in his arms. He hadn't shared a bed with anyone since Amelia. 4 years of sleeping alone, of waking up, reaching for someone who wasn't there. Last night, when Lynn had curled against him and he'd felt her breathing slow into sleep, something had cracked open in his chest. Relief, gratitude. The terrifying, wonderful realization that he was capable of this again. He found her in the kitchen, wearing an oversized t-shirt and stirring something on the stove. She looked up when he entered, and her smile made his heart stutter. Morning. Morning. He crossed the room and wrapped his arms around her from behind, pressing a kiss to her shoulder. What are you making? Scrambled eggs, nothing fancy. It smells amazing. You're easy to please. Only when it comes to you. They ate breakfast at her small kitchen table, knees touching underneath, talking about nothing and everything. Charles told her about his childhood obsession with model trains, about the elaborate setup his father had helped him build in the basement of their Charleston house. Lynn told him about the summer she'd spent backpacking through Europe after college, about the tiny hostel in Barcelona, where she'd first fallen in love with interior design. There was this common room, she said, her eyes distant with memory, completely mismatched furniture, rugs that clashed, art that didn't go together at all, but somehow it worked. It felt alive, like a space that had evolved organically over years of different people adding their own touches. She smiled. I remember thinking, this is what I want to do. I want to create spaces that feel like this, that tell stories. And now you do. And now I do. She reached across the table and took his hand. What about you? When did you know you wanted to build hotels? Charles considered the question. I didn't, actually. Not at first. Growing up, I wanted to be an architect. I used to draw buildings constantly, houses, skyscrapers, stadiums. I thought I'd design the next great American landmark. What changed? My father. Charles's voice softened. He was in real estate development. Practical, bottom-line stuff. He told me architecture was a nice hobby, but not a career path for someone who wanted to actually make a difference. He laughed, but there was an edge to it. So I went to business school instead, learned to speak his language, and then he died before I could prove to him that I was worth listening to. Lynn squeezed his hand. I'm sorry. The irony is, the hotels are my way of doing both. I don't just build properties, I design them. Every Mershon hotel has my fingerprints on it. The layouts, the atmospheres, the way spaces flow into each other. It's architecture through the back door. He met her eyes. Dad would probably be horrified. Or proud. Maybe both. I think he'd be proud. Lynn stood and came around the table, settling into his lap. You took his legacy and made it something bigger, something more beautiful. That's not betrayal, that's evolution. Charles wrapped his arms around her waist, pulling her close. How do you always know exactly what to say? I don't. I just say what's true. She kissed his forehead, then his cheek, then his lips. Now, we have an entire weekend ahead of us. What do you want to do? This. He gestured at the space between them. Just this, being with you, talking, existing in the same space without a screen between us. That can be arranged. They spent the day exploring Atlanta together. Lynn showed him her favorite spots, the coffee shop where she'd first sketched designs for Philpott Designs, the park where she ran on Sunday mornings, the bookstore that stayed open until midnight and had a cat named Hemingway who slept on the poetry shelves. I love this city, she said as they walked through Piedmont Park, their breath fogging in the cold January air. "It's not as charming as Charleston, maybe, but it's mine. I built a life here. It suits you. You think so?" "I know so." Charles stopped walking and turned to face her. "Lynn, I've been thinking." "About what?" "About us. About the distance. About how I want to see you more than once every 2 weeks." He took a deep breath. "I know it's early. I know we're still figuring this out. But I don't want to keep doing this flying back and forth, counting the hours until we can see each other again. I want more." Lynn's expression was careful. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I want to find a way to make this work, really work. Not just phone calls and weekend visits, but something real, something lasting." He took her hands in his. "I don't have all the answers yet. I don't know how the logistics would work, but I know I don't want to lose you to 300 miles of highway." "Charles," Lynn's voice was thick, "I want that too, but my business is here. Your business is everywhere, but your home is Charleston. How would we? We'd figure it out. Together." He squeezed her hands. "I'm not asking you to move tomorrow. I'm not asking you to give up anything. I'm just asking you to believe that this is worth fighting for. That we're worth fighting for." Lynn was quiet for a long moment. Charles watched the emotions play across her face. Fear, hope, uncertainty, longing. Finally, she nodded. "We're worth fighting for," she agreed. "Whatever it takes." Charles pulled her into a kiss, right there in the middle of Piedmont Park, with the Atlanta skyline glittering behind them. When they broke apart, both were smiling. "So," Lynn said, "what's the plan?" "For now, I'll come to you as often as I can. You come to me when you're able. We make every minute count." He tucked a curl behind her ear. "And when the time is right, we talk about next steps. No pressure, no ultimatums. Just two people choosing each other, one day at a time." "I can live with that." "Good." He kissed her again, softly this time. "Because I'm not going anywhere, Lynn Philpott. Not now, not ever." The weekend ended too soon. Sunday afternoon found them at the airport, standing at the security checkpoint, neither wanting to say goodbye. "Thank you for this weekend," Lynn said, her hands wrapped around his. "For coming here. For everything. Thank you for letting me in." Charles pressed his forehead to hers. "I'll call you when I land." "You better. And I'll see you next weekend. I can fly you to Charleston, show you the new hotel designs I've been working on. I'd like that." They stood there for a moment longer, suspended in the space between goodbye and what came next. Then Charles kissed her deep and slow and full of promise and walked away. Lynn watched him until he disappeared through security. Then she turned and headed for the parking garage, already counting the hours until she'd see him again. Her phone buzzed before she reached her car. "I'm already missing you. Pretty sure that's a medical condition at this point." She laughed and typed back, "Highly contagious. No known cure. I don't want a cure. I want you." Lynn stared at the message, her heart full to bursting. 5 weeks ago, she'd grabbed the wrong suitcase at an airport. Now she was falling in love with a man who made her feel like the most important person in the world. Life was strange. Life was wonderful. And for the first time in 2 years, Lynn was grateful for every twist and turn that had led her here. February arrived wrapped in grey skies and the promise of something Lynn wasn't quite ready to name. She stood in the Grant Park Victorian, clipboard in hand, surveying the chaos of renovation. Walls had been torn down, exposing century-old bones. Dust hung in the air, catching the weak winter light. The couple who owned the house, Brianna and Drew, newlyweds with more enthusiasm than sense, hovered nearby, waiting for her verdict. "The original moldings are salvageable," Lynn said, running her fingers along a section of ornate trim that had survived decades of paint and neglect. "And these floors, once we strip them, they're going to be stunning. Heart pine. You can't buy this anymore." "So it's not hopeless?" Brianna asked, her voice trembling with hope. "Nothing's hopeless if you're willing to put in the work," Lynn smiled. "This house has good bones. We just need to bring them back to life." It was the kind of project she lived for: resurrection, restoration, the transformation of something forgotten into something loved. She'd spent 3 weeks now buried in plans and samples and contractor meetings, losing herself in the work the way she always did. But this time, there was someone waiting on the other end of her long days. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. "Charles, how's the Victorian? Still standing?" "Barely, but give me 6 months, and it'll be the prettiest house on the block." "I don't doubt it. You could make a cardboard box beautiful." Lynn smiled, tucking the phone against her shoulder as she made notes on her clipboard. "Flattery will get you everywhere. What's happening in Charleston?" "Meetings. So many meetings. I'm starting to forget what sunlight looks like. Poor billionaire. Such a hard life. Mock me all you want. I miss you." 3 words. Simple words. But every time he said them, Lynn felt something loosen in her chest, like a knot she'd been carrying for years was slowly coming undone. "I miss you too," she typed back. 2 more days? 2 more days. And I have something planned. Something? A surprise. Don't try to guess, you won't figure it out. That sounds like a challenge. It's not. It's a promise. See you Friday. Lynn pocketed her phone and turned back to Brianna and Drew, who were watching her with barely concealed curiosity. "Sorry about that. Where were we?" "The floors," Drew said. "But honestly, we're more interested in whoever's making you smile like that." Lynn felt her cheeks warm. "That's not relevant to the renovation. It's relevant to our favorite designer's happiness." Brianna grinned. "Is it serious?" Lynn thought about Charles. About the weekends they'd stolen together over the past month, one in Charleston, one in Atlanta, one in Savannah, where he'd finally met her parents and survived her father's interrogation with flying colors. About the phone calls that stretched past midnight and the good morning texts that arrived before she'd finished her coffee. "Yeah," she admitted. "It's serious." Charles sat in his office, staring at the small velvet box in his hand. It wasn't an engagement ring. Not yet. It was too soon for that, even though some part of him, some impatient, reckless part that Amelia would have laughed at, wanted to propose tomorrow. But he'd learned patience the hard way. He knew that rushing something precious was the surest way to destroy it. So instead, he'd chosen something else. Something meaningful. A key. Not to his house, that would be presumptuous, but to a suite at the Charleston Mershon, the flagship property he'd built from the ground up after his father died. Suite 712, with its view of the harbor and its private terrace and its memories of the first anniversary he'd spent there with Amelia, back when he'd thought they had forever. He wanted to give Lynn access to that space. Wanted her to know she had a home in Charleston whenever she needed it. Wanted her to understand that he wasn't just offering weekends and phone calls anymore, he was offering a place in his life. His mother appeared in the doorway, knocking softly on the frame. "You're brooding again." "I'm not brooding. I'm thinking." "Same thing for you." Catherine crossed the room and settled into the chair across from his desk. "What's in the box?" "A key. To the suite at the hotel." "For Lynn?" "For Lynn." Charles turned the box over in his hands. "I want her to know she has somewhere to go when she's here. Somewhere that's hers." Catherine was quiet for a moment, her eyes soft. "That's a big gesture, Charles. Is it too much? Am I moving too fast?" "I don't think there's a too fast when you know." Catherine reached across the desk and covered his hand with hers. "Do you know?" Charles thought about Lynn, about the way she challenged him and supported him and made him laugh at himself, about the way she saw through his defenses without making him feel exposed, about the way his heart raced every time his phone lit up with her name. "I know," he said quietly. "I've known for weeks, maybe longer." "Have you told her?" "Not in words. Not the words." "I love you" isn't just words, Charles. It's a declaration, a commitment. She deserves to hear it. "I know. I'm planning to tell her this weekend." Catherine smiled, and Charles saw tears glistening in her eyes. "Your father would be proud of you, for opening your heart again, for being brave enough to try." "You think so?" "I know so." She squeezed his hand. "Amelia would be proud too. She'd want this for you. She'd want you to be happy." Charles looked down at the velvet box, feeling the weight of everything it represented. Hope, vulnerability, the terrifying, exhilarating leap of trusting someone with his battered heart. "I want to be happy," he admitted. "I'd forgotten what that felt like. And then Lynn grabbed my suitcase at an airport, and suddenly I remembered." "Then tell her. Show her. Give her the key and the words and whatever else she needs to know that you're all in." Catherine stood and pressed a kiss to her son's forehead. "Life's too short to hold back, sweetheart. We both know that better than most." Lynn arrived in Charleston on Friday evening, exhausted from a week of renovation chaos, but buzzing with anticipation. Charles met her at the airport. He'd started doing that, insisting on being there the moment she landed, as if the extra 20 minutes of togetherness mattered. And maybe they did. Maybe every minute mattered when you were building something new. "Hi." He pulled her into his arms the moment she cleared the arrivals gate. "I missed you. You said that this morning." "I meant it this morning too." He kissed her, soft and sweet, then pulled back to look at her. "Ready for your surprise?" "I've been trying to guess all week. Is it dinner? A show? A spontaneous trip to Paris?" "Nothing that dramatic." He took her hand and led her toward the parking garage. "But I think you'll like it." They drove to the Charleston Merchant, the flagship property that Charles had built 7 years ago. Lynn had been there before. They'd had dinner at the rooftop restaurant, drinks at the bar, but Charles bypassed all the public spaces, leading her instead to a private elevator that required a key card. "Where are we going?" "You'll see." The elevator opened onto a hallway with only one door. Charles pulled out a small velvet box and pressed it into her hands. "Open it." Lynn's heart stuttered. For one wild moment, she thought, but no. The box was too small, the shape wrong, not a ring. She opened it and found a key, ornate, old-fashioned, attached to a delicate silver keychain. "It's to this suite," Charles explained. "Suite 712. I built it when I built the hotel. It's my personal space here, the place I come when I need to think or work or just exist." He took her hands in his. "I want you to have access to it, whenever you want, whether I'm here or not." Lynn stared at the key, then at him. "Charles, this is too much? I know it might seem like." "No." She shook her head, her eyes filling with tears she didn't try to hide. "Not too much. It's perfect. It's—" She threw her arms around him, burying her face in his chest. "Thank you. Thank you for trusting me with this." "I trust you with everything." His voice was rough against her hair. "Lynn, I need to tell you something." She pulled back to look at him, her heart pounding. "I love you." The words came out like a confession, like a prayer. "I've loved you for weeks, but I've been too afraid to say it. Too afraid that it was too soon, or too much, or that I'd scare you away." He cupped her face in his hands. "But I can't hold it in anymore. I love you, Lynn Philpott, completely, irrevocably, more than I thought I could love anyone again." The tears spilled over, streaming down her cheeks. "I love you too," she whispered. "I've been so scared to say it, so scared that if I admitted how much you meant to me, something would go wrong. Something always goes wrong." "Not this time." Charles wiped her tears with his thumbs. "Not us. We're going to be different." "How do you know?" "Because I choose you. Every day, every moment, I choose you. And I'm going to keep choosing you until you believe it." Lynn kissed him, then really kissed him, with all the love she'd been holding back, all the fear she was finally ready to release. When they broke apart, both were breathless, both were crying, and both were smiling like fools. "Show me the suite," Lynn said. "Show me our place." Charles took her hand and unlocked the door. Suite 712 was everything Lynn would have expected from Charles, elegant but warm, designed with the kind of intentionality she recognized from her own work. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Charleston Harbor, a private terrace wrapped around two sides, offering views of the city lights and the water beyond. The furniture was comfortable without being casual, the art meaningful without being ostentatious. It felt like a home, not a hotel room. "I designed this space myself," Charles said, watching her explore. "It's the only suite in any of my properties that I had full creative control over. Everyone else gets the Merchant brand. This is just me." "It's beautiful." Lynn ran her hand along the back of a leather armchair. "It reminds me of you, polished on the surface, but warm underneath. Is that how you see me?" "That's how you are." She turned to face him. "You present this image of the successful businessman, the put-together billionaire. But underneath, you're just a man who builds model trains and misses his dog and watches his mother's cooking shows with her on Sunday afternoons." Charles laughed, caught off guard. "You remember that?" "I remember everything you tell me." Lynn crossed the room and took his hands. "I love the polished version of you, but I love the underneath version more." "Lynn," he pulled her close, holding her like she was something precious. "I don't know what I did to deserve you." You showed up. You kept showing up, even when it was hard, even when you were scared. She looked up at him with eyes full of love. That's all any of us can do. Show up and hope it's enough. You're more than enough. You're everything. They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other, watching the lights of Charleston twinkle through the windows. Lynn felt something settle in her chest. Peace, maybe, or hope, or the beginning of something she'd stopped believing was possible. I could get used to this, she murmured. That's the plan. Charles pressed a kiss to her hair. Now come on. I had dinner delivered before you got here. It's probably cold by now, but I don't care. What did you get? Shrimp and grits. From Magnolia's. Lynn laughed, her heart overflowing. You remembered. I remember everything too. The weekend passed in a blur of happiness. They explored Charleston together, wandering through the historic district like tourists, even though Charles had lived there his entire life. They had dinner with Catherine, who welcomed Lynn with open arms and spent the evening sharing embarrassing stories about Charles's childhood. They went to church on Sunday morning, something Charles admitted he hadn't done since Amelia died, and Lynn held his hand through the entire service, not saying anything, just being there. Thank you, he said afterward, as they walked through the cemetery where his father was buried. For what? For coming with me, for not making it weird. He stopped in front of a headstone, Robert James Mershon, beloved husband and father, and stood in silence for a moment. I've avoided this place for years. It felt like admitting defeat, like acknowledging that he was really gone. Grief isn't defeat. Lynn slipped her hand into his. It's love with nowhere to go. Charles looked at her, his eyes shining. Where did you hear that? My grandmother used to say it. After my grandfather died, she visited his grave every Sunday for 20 years. Said talking to him made her feel like he was still there, listening. Lynn squeezed his hand. Maybe your dad is still listening too. Charles turned back to the headstone. For a long moment, he just stood there, his jaw tight, his breathing uneven. Then he spoke. Hey, Dad. It's been a while. His voice cracked. I'm sorry I haven't visited. I was angry, hurt. You left before I could, before we could fix things. He took a shaky breath. But I'm trying to do better. Build something you'd be proud of. And I met someone. Her name is Lynn. She's incredible, Dad. You'd love her. Lynn felt tears streaming down her face, but she didn't move, didn't speak. This moment wasn't for her. It was for Charles, and she was just honored to witness it. I miss you, Charles finished quietly. Every day. But I'm going to be okay. I'm going to be happy. I think you'd want that for me. He stood there a moment longer, then turned and pulled Lynn into his arms. Thank you, he whispered. Always, she whispered back. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. But life had a way of testing even the strongest promises. The call came Monday morning, while Lynn was on her way back to Atlanta. Charles's voice on the phone was tight, controlled the voice he used when he was trying not to fall apart. There's a problem with Tokyo. A structural issue with the building. The opening might have to be postponed. Oh no, how bad is it? Bad. I need to fly out tomorrow. Could be there for weeks. He paused. Lynn, I'm so sorry. I know we had plans. Charles, stop. She pulled into a rest stop, giving him her full attention. This is your business, your life's work. Go to Tokyo. Do what you need to do. But Valentine's Day is just a date on a calendar. We can celebrate when you get back. She kept her voice steady, even though her heart was sinking. I'm not going anywhere, remember. We'll figure this out. Charles was quiet for a moment. I don't deserve you. You deserve everything. Now go save your hotel. Call me when you land. I will. I love you, Lynn. I love you too. Be safe. She hung up and sat in her car for a long moment, staring at the highway stretching ahead of her. 300 miles to Atlanta, thousands more to Tokyo. The distance between them suddenly felt insurmountable, but then she touched the bracelet on her wrist, the tiny suitcase charm cool against her fingers. She thought about the key in her purse, the suite waiting for her in Charleston. She thought about Charles's voice when he said, I love you, like the words were being pulled from somewhere deep inside him. This was real, they were real, and real things survived distance and time and all the obstacles life threw at them. At least, she hoped they did. Her phone buzzed. A text from Charles. I know this is hard, but we're worth fighting for. Remember? Lynn smiled despite the ache in her chest. We're worth fighting for, she typed back. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. I'll call you from Tokyo. We'll make this work. I know we will. She started the car and pulled back onto the highway, heading home. Atlanta waited. Her business waited. The Victorian renovation waited. And somewhere across an ocean, Charles was preparing to fly to the other side of the world. But love, Lynn was learning, didn't care about miles or time zones. Love just asked you to show up, over and over again, and trust that showing up was enough. She was ready to show up. She just hoped the distance wouldn't break them first. Tokyo was 14 hours ahead of Charleston. Charles learned this fact intimately over the following 3 weeks, waking at odd hours to catch Lynn before she went to bed, falling asleep to the sound of her voice through his phone speaker. The time difference was brutal, the distance was worse. But every morning, no matter how exhausted he was, he sent her the same message, "Good morning from tomorrow. I love you." And every night she replied, "Good night from yesterday. I love you too." It wasn't enough. It was never enough. But it was something to hold on to when the structural engineers delivered another round of bad news, when the contractors argued about timelines, when Charles stood in the skeleton of his Tokyo hotel and wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. The issue turned out to be foundation-related, a flaw in the original surveying that had gone undetected until now. Fixing it meant delays, months of delays. The April opening was impossible. Summer was unlikely. Fall was the best-case scenario. Charles stood on the construction site on Valentine's Day, hard hat on his head and phone pressed to his ear, listening to Lynn describe her day. "Brianna cried when she saw the flaws," she was saying. "The heart pine came up beautifully. You should have seen her face, Charles, like she was seeing her future. That's because she was. You gave her that. We gave her that. The whole team. I'm just the one who draws the pictures. You're the one who sees what no one else can see. That's not nothing." Lynn was quiet for a moment. "I miss you. Is that getting old yet?" "Never." Charles closed his eyes, picturing her face. 3 weeks. 3 weeks since he'd held her, kissed her, fallen asleep with her in his arms. It felt like 3 years. "I miss you so much it hurts, like a physical ache in my chest. When are you coming home?" "I don't know. Another week, maybe 2. There are decisions that have to be made in person." He rubbed his forehead. "I'm sorry. I know this isn't what you signed up for. I signed up for you, all of you, including the part that runs a global hotel empire and sometimes has to fly to the other side of the world." Lynn's voice was fierce with love. "We're worth fighting for, remember? Whatever it takes." "Whatever it takes," Charles repeated, but the words felt hollow tonight. Tonight, with 14 time zones between them and no end in sight, "whatever it takes" felt like a promise he wasn't sure he could keep. The call came at 3 in the morning, Tokyo time. Charles was asleep fitfully, the way he always slept in hotels that weren't his own when his phone started buzzing. He grabbed it without looking, expecting another crisis with the construction. Instead, he heard Evelyn's voice, tight with fear. "Charles, it's Mom. She's in the hospital." The world stopped. "What happened?" "She collapsed at home. The doctors think it's her heart. They're running tests now, but—" Evelyn's voice broke. "You need to come home. Charles, please. You need to come home." He was on a plane within 4 hours. The flight from Tokyo to Charleston took 18 hours with a layover in San Francisco. 18 hours of staring out the window, unable to sleep, unable to think, unable to do anything but pray to a God he wasn't sure he believed in anymore. Not her, please. Not her too. He'd already lost his father. He'd already lost Amelia. The idea of losing his mother, the one person who'd held him together through all of it, was more than he could bear. His phone was in airplane mode, but before takeoff, he'd managed to send one message to Lynn. "Mom's in the hospital. Heart. Flying home now. I'm scared." He didn't know if she'd gotten it, didn't know if she was awake, didn't know anything except that the world was falling apart again, and this time he wasn't sure he could survive it. Lynn was at the Charleston airport when Charles landed. She'd driven through the night the moment she got his message, pushing her rental car down I-26 at speeds that would have horrified her father. She hadn't called, hadn't texted, just drove, Because some things couldn't be said through a screen. Some things required presence. Charles came through the arrival's gate, looking like a ghost of himself. Rumpled clothes, hollow eyes, the kind of exhaustion that went deeper than sleeplessness. When he saw her, he stopped walking. Just stopped, like he couldn't believe she was real. "Lynn? I'm here." She closed the distance between them and wrapped her arms around him. "I'm here, Charles. I've got you." He broke. Right there in the middle of Charleston International Airport, Charles Merchant, billionaire, CEO, man who'd built an empire through sheer force of will, collapsed into her arms and sobbed like a child. Lynn held him through it, not caring about the stairs, not caring about anything except being there, being enough. "I can't lose her," he gasped against her shoulder. "I can't. She's all I have left." "You won't. She's strong. She's Catherine Merchant, for God's sake. She's too stubborn to go anywhere." Charles laughed, despite himself, a wet, broken sound. That's what she'd say." "Of course it is. Now come on." Lynn pulled back and cupped his face in her hands, wiping his tears with her thumbs. "Let's go see your mother." Catherine was awake when they arrived at the hospital. She looked smaller in the hospital bed, surrounded by machines and tubes, but her eyes were bright, and when she saw Charles, she smiled. "There's my dramatic son. Flew all the way from Tokyo just because I had a little spell." "Mom." Charles crossed the room and took her hand, his voice breaking. "Don't joke. Not about this. If I can't joke about my own heart attack, what can I joke about?" Catherine squeezed his hand with surprising strength. "I'm fine, sweetheart. The doctors say it was mild. They're going to do some procedures, put in a stent, and I'll be back to nagging you about grandchildren in no time." "Grandchildren? I'm not getting any younger. Neither are you." Catherine's gaze shifted to Lynn, who was hovering in the doorway. Come in, don't be shy." Lynn approached the bed, her heart aching at the sight of this fierce, wonderful woman looking so fragile. "Hi, Mrs. Merchant." "Catherine, I've told you 100 times." Catherine reached for Lynn's hand with her free one, holding both of them now. "Thank you for being here, for taking care of my boy. Always. I mean it." Catherine's eyes were serious now, cutting through the jokes and the bravado. "I've watched my son shut himself off from life for 4 years. I thought I'd never see him happy again. And then you came along, with your wrong suitcase and your beautiful smile, and suddenly he was alive again." Tears glistened in her eyes. "Whatever happens to me, I need to know he'll be okay, that he won't go back to that dark place." "He won't." Lynn squeezed her hand. "I won't let him." "Good." Catherine smiled. "Then I can focus on getting better. I have a wedding to attend. After all." Charles made a choking sound. "Mom, I haven't." "Oh, please, I know you, Charles. You've been carrying a ring around for weeks. You think I didn't notice?" Lynn's head snapped toward Charles. "A ring?" Charles's face went red. "I was going to. It was supposed to be." He ran a hand through his hair, looking utterly undone. "This isn't how I planned this." "Life rarely goes according to plan." Catherine patted his hand. "But sometimes that's when the best things happen." They stayed at the hospital until evening, when the nurses gently but firmly suggested that Catherine needed rest. Evelyn had arrived that afternoon, and she promised to stay the night, calling them immediately if anything changed. Charles hugged his sister tight, thanked her for holding down the fort, and let Lynn lead him out to her car. "Where are we going?" he asked as she drove through the Charleston streets. "Suite 712. You need to sleep." "I don't think I can sleep." "Then you need to lie down and stare at the ceiling in a comfortable bed instead of a hospital chair." She glanced at him. "And I need to be with you. Is that okay?" "That's all I want." He reached over and took her hand. "Lynn, what my mother said about the ring, we don't have to talk about that now." "I want to." He turned to face her, his eyes intense despite the exhaustion. "I've been carrying it for over a month. Since before Tokyo, I was going to propose on Valentine's Day. I had this whole thing planned: dinner at Magnolia's, a walk on the waterfront, getting down on one knee at sunset." Lynn's heart was pounding. "Charles." "But then Tokyo happened, and I thought I'd wait until things settled down, until I could give you the proposal you deserved." He laughed bitterly. "And now my mother's in the hospital, and I'm a mess, and nothing is going according to plan. I don't need a plan. Lynn pulled the car over. She couldn't have this conversation while driving, couldn't focus on anything except him. I don't need a perfect proposal or a sunset or any of that. I just need you. Even like this? Exhausted and scared and falling apart? Especially like this. She unbuckled her seatbelt and turned to face him fully. Charles, the polished version of you is wonderful. But this version, the one who flies across the world for his mother, who cries in airports, who loves so hard it terrifies him, this is the version I fell in love with, the real one. Charles stared at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. I know this isn't romantic. I know I should wait for a better moment. But I've learned something over the past few years. His voice cracked. There's no such thing as a perfect moment. There's just this moment, right now, and I don't want to waste another second pretending otherwise. He opened the box. Inside was a ring, not ostentatious, not overwhelming, but beautiful. A round diamond set in a delicate band with smaller stones on either side. Classic, timeless, perfect. Lynn Ann Philpott. Charles's voice was steady now, full of certainty. I have loved you since the moment you called me about a suitcase. I have loved you through coffee shops and airport goodbyes and 3-week separations that felt like lifetimes. I have loved you in your apartment in Atlanta and my suite in Charleston and everywhere in between. He took her hand, the ring box balanced on his palm. I want to love you for the rest of my life. I want to build a home with you, a family with you, a future with you. I want to wake up next to you every morning and fall asleep beside you every night. I want everything, Lynn, but only if it's with you. Tears were streaming down Lynn's face. She couldn't speak, could barely breathe. Will you marry me? The word came out like a sob, like a prayer, like the beginning of everything. Yes. They made it to Suite 712 eventually. Lynn didn't remember the drive, didn't remember the elevator, didn't remember anything except Charles's hand in hers and the ring on her finger, where it caught the light every time she moved and reminded her that this was real. They fell into bed fully clothed, too exhausted for anything except holding each other. Charles wrapped himself around her like she was the only thing keeping him tethered to the earth, and Lynn let him, pressing kisses to his hair and his forehead and anywhere else she could reach. I love you, she whispered into the darkness. I love you too. His voice was thick with sleep. Thank you for being here, for always being here. There's nowhere else I'd rather be. Charles was asleep within minutes, his breathing evening out, his grip on her loosening as he finally let go of the fear he'd been carrying. Lynn lay awake a little longer, watching him sleep, marveling at the strange and wonderful path that had led her here. 6 months ago, she'd grabbed the wrong suitcase at an airport. Now she was engaged to the man she loved, wearing a ring that sparkled in the moonlight, planning a future she'd stopped believing was possible. Life was strange. Life was wonderful. And Lynn was finally, completely, overwhelmingly happy. 6 months later. The wedding was held at the Charleston Mansion, in the rooftop garden that Charles had designed himself. It was a small ceremony, just family and close friends, the people who mattered most. Catherine sat in the front row, recovered and radiant, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief. Walter and Rosalind sat beside her, holding hands the way they always did, beaming with pride. Evelyn stood as Charles's best woman. You're my best friend, he told her, and I don't care if it's unconventional, while Paloma served as Lynn's maid of honor. The sunset painted the sky in shades of pink and gold as Lynn walked down the aisle, her father's arm steady beneath her hand. She wore a simple dress, elegant but not fussy, because that's who she was, and the silver bracelet with the suitcase charm that she'd never taken off since Christmas. Charles waited at the end of the aisle, tears already streaming down his face. You're supposed to wait until the vows to cry, she whispered when she reached him. I've been waiting my whole life for you. I'm allowed to cry whenever I want. The ceremony was short and sweet. They'd written their own vows, and the guests laughed and cried in equal measure as Charles and Lynn promised themselves to each other. I vow to always check the luggage tag before grabbing a suitcase, Charles said, earning a ripple of laughter. I vow to bring you shrimp and grits whenever you're sad and coffee whenever you're tired. I vow to support your dreams, celebrate your successes, and hold you through your failures. I vow to be your partner in everything, in love, in life, in whatever adventures come our way. His voice dropped, becoming intimate despite the audience. And I vow to choose you, Lynn. Every day, every moment, for the rest of my life. You are my home. You are my heart. You are everything I never knew I needed. Lynn had to wait for her tears to subside before she could speak. I vow to never let you brood alone, she began, smiling through her tears. I vow to remind you that you're more than your work, more than your legacy, more than the man everyone else sees. I vow to love the polished version of you and the underneath version. I vow to hold your hand in hospitals, in cemeteries, in airports, and everywhere in between. She squeezed his hands. I vow to build a life with you that would make our parents proud and our children inspired. I vow to fight for us, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard, because we're worth fighting for, whatever it takes. Whatever it takes, Charles repeated, his voice breaking. By the power vested in me, the officiant said, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride. Charles pulled Lynn into his arms and kissed her, like the world was ending and beginning all at once. The guests erupted into applause. Catherine sobbed openly. Walter wiped his eyes and pretended he wasn't crying. And Lynn had never felt more loved, more seen, more completely and utterly happy. Later, after the dinner and the dancing and the speeches that made everyone cry, Charles and Lynn slipped away to the terrace overlooking the harbour, the same spot where they'd shared their first kiss almost a year ago now. So, Charles said, wrapping his arms around her from behind, how does it feel to be Mrs. Mershon? I'm keeping my name professionally. Mrs. Philpott, Mershon then. Lynn Philpott, Mershon. She tested the sound of it. I could get used to that. You have the rest of your life to get used to it. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the lights of Charleston twinkle below. Somewhere inside, the party continued, but out here, it was just the two of them. The way it had been that first night had been and gone. The way it would be for all the nights to come. I have something for you, Lynn said, turning in his arms. A wedding gift. You didn't have to. I wanted to. She pulled a small envelope from the hidden pocket of her dress. Open it. Inside was a photograph. A tiny black and white image. Grainy but unmistakable. Charles stared at it, his brow furrowed. Then his eyes went wide. Lynn, is this our you? 8 weeks. Her smile was radiant, incandescent, the happiest she'd ever been. I found out last week. I wanted to wait until today to tell you. Charles looked at the ultrasound photo, then at Lynn, then back at the photo. His hands were shaking. We're having a baby. We're having a baby. He let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob, and pulled her into his arms. I love you. I love you so much. I love you more than... He couldn't finish. Couldn't find words big enough. I know. Lynn held him tight, feeling his tears soak into her shoulder. I know, Charles. I love you too. They stayed like that for a long time, wrapped in each other, with the city glittering below and the stars emerging above and a whole new future stretching out before them. A future that had started with a wrong suitcase. A future that had grown into something neither of them had dared to dream. A future that was only just beginning. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine. So do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.